now like to ask our second presenter to come up, Natalie Williams. Natalie is from central Western Queensland, where she runs a beef grazing operation.
My topic was soil carbon sequestration in Northern Australia, in arid and semi-arid and rangeland environments. I was looking at, can farmers actually make an income from putting a price on carbon? Thank you. I'd like to thank Macquarie Agricultural Funds for taking a punt on me. My topic is somewhat controversial, especially in the political realms of the last couple of years, and Macquarie was kind enough to take a punt on me and see what can come out of this type of research. I'd particularly like to thank Jock Whittle and Jeff Murrell. They're part of Paraway Pastoral, which is the beef cattle arm of Macquarie Ag Funds. I'm actually married, have 2 children. Granville, our block is 7,600 hectares in Western Queensland. We're in the business of pasture-fed sustainable beef. The reason I chose this topic is for the last 15 years we've been doing work above the ground, improving water holding capacity, ground cover, etc. And we think that we sort of have maxed out on what we can do with the soil, the land, the country above the top of the soil, and I was interested in the actions and interactions of what's happening below the surface. We turned D-class pasturing into A-class pasturing in 15 years. Used to run 160 breeders, now we run just under 2,000. That's just some before and after photos of home. Countries I visited were very prescriptive. The work being done in tropical and hot climate soil carbon sequestration is very, very limited. There's a lot more in temperate climates and arable country, but not the type of work that we were doing. So I had to do a lot of research into where I could actually go and look at trials applicable to what we were doing. And what's even less on the ground is farmers doing scientific work. There's a lot of anecdotal work happening, but not much that's got verifiable data with it, associated with it. So my intuitions and what we've seen at home on the ground prove my intuitions right. We can sequester carbon in Northern Australia, but to do that, there's a few issues. We have to change the management models that we use significantly with beef cattle. You have to change the grazing management in particular. If we change the focus from purely a production focus and go into a sequestering carbon or carbon farming focus, you find that the productivity all happens anyway. But you have to change your focus back to the soils. Also, a good understanding of the soil food web and how those mechanisms within those soil biota actually work, and that's the bit that I was looking at in my studies. The transition phase from typical production-based agriculture or industrial agriculture is the hardest financially, and everyone that's done this sort of thing will tell you that. And you need to want to wean yourself from productive or industrial agriculture. So some of the stuff that I looked at that is applicable to what I wanted to look at was looking at perennial grasses and the root depth of perennial grasses. Switchgrass in Oklahoma was very interesting to me. It can have root mass up to 25 feet down. I looked also in hot climates, you have methane emissions from the soil, not just from the cattle. So there was some research that I looked at looking at the greenhouse gases that are actually coming from the soil naturally. The one on the bottom right is a no-kill, no-till pasture crop. That sort of is a real paradigm shift in looking at how in the future those fellas are way out on a limb doing stuff that is really incredibly powerful. I saw people from policymaker level. I went to research facilities. I went to farmers in Wales that are doing extraordinary work on their dairy farms. I looked at fellas doing germinating seeds from Iceland that no one else can then germinate in the world. It was extraordinary, the people that I saw and the places I was able to visit. And there's been a bit of a thing about animals, especially cloven hoof animals in Northern Australia, wrecking ecosystems. But I found this also to be untrue. The map on the left is Northwick Research Farm, which is part of the Rothamsted Institute in the UK, the red parts are, I asked them the difference. The red parts are 6% carbon in their soils. The green is down to 2, and I asked them what the difference was. The green is actually long-term arable farming land, and the red is dairy farms, so animals do have a positive impact on ecosystems. The one on the right, is a grazing trial where by correct grazing management it causes extremely good root mass, and just purely looking at that picture you know that you're sequestering carbon and building soil when you've got root systems like that. So the biggest benefits though from sequestering carbon are the co-benefits: soil fertility, water holding capacity, drought tolerance, disease resistance. Nutrient densities of food actually increase when you fix the soils, and you have an increased feel-good factor. I'm not sure how many farmers come in of a nighttime air punching when they've put a ton of chemical on their paddock for the day. So if in long-term things, looking at changing management systems, there is a significant feel-good factor in what you're doing. There's decreased input costs. There's decreased mustering costs, particularly in Northern Australia when you're looking at over huge scale of getting cattle in one place. And you decrease your long-term reliance on chemicals and decrease your resistance problems. It also decreases methane emissions in cattle. This one's for Terry. When I was having my national interview, he asked me, did I have radionics towers on our property? And I said, no, Terry, but I actually do other voodoo. It really threw me because I wasn't expecting to get a question like that at that interview. And so this is the voodoo that I actually am interested in. No one can explain why it works, but ancient cultures, which were all ag-based, had places of high energy where they put their seed before they planted. And it for some reason, this alternative earth energy stuff increases germination, frost tolerance, so have less disease. So in my travels, if I happened upon a Stonehenge or some sort of alternative stuff, I stopped and asked about it, and yeah, so I don't do radionics, but that's the voodoo that I do at home. I also come across another outlier for what could possibly be a change in the way money's funded for agriculture, and it's called slow money. It's almost like the slow food movement, but slow money is long-term investment because it does take time to change the soil, improve productivity in biological systems. And so because of that constraint of changing systems, there's now funding models that you have no return, that you're basically interest-free for 5 years, longer-term loans. Sovereign funds would benefit from this type of thing, that are just looking for food security, particularly in Asia, and the opportunities that Northern Australia provide for us. Where to from here? I don't think it'll be long before we, at farm level, have to provide carbon footprinting or life cycle analysis of our emissions on farm, and this is where soil carbon comes into its own, where we're not only accounting for the emissions going out, but we can account for what we're sucking back out of the atmosphere into the soil. It gives a far more equilibrium to the agricultural argument. I also think there's real opportunity for sustainability branding in Australia, and in particular the sugar industry, that really have got their stuff together with looking after the soils, low chemical use. As an industry, I think the sugar industry would be well poised to do product differentiation with Australian sugar. We also need to do some work in seed bioinoculants and soil bioinoculants to look at how that soil biota actually works and the interactions between each. I also think, particularly with fresh food, nutrient density premiums, when you're looking at what people are eating into the future, by changing your systems, you are increasing the nutrient densities. We also have to, as agriculture, differentiate agricultural ecosystems from environmental, and particularly political environmentalism. We do it in agriculture. If you're not doing industrial agriculture, then you're a raging hippie, which is not actually the case. So for me, I'm not a raging hippie. I just want long-term sustainability of our beef cattle enterprise. So yeah, I found that a challenge everywhere I went. People were like, oh yeah, you know, that won't work because you need chemicals, etc. Also in Northern Australia, we don't sequester much carbon, but when you take it up to scale, if we were to put aggregations of say 1 million acres together and offset that with mining companies or some sort of mechanism like that, I think there's opportunity to actually trade carbon. R&D wise, the fellow in the photo on the left, Charles Waltall, is one of the bosses of the USDA Research Service, and they're doing what's called reverse science, where now they're saying biodynamics, compost teas, yeah, they're all voodoo. Let's see why they actually do work. So they're taking the science now and going back and trying to work out why those interactions within the soil work and what's so powerful, and finding out why those systems work. I also think there's an opportunity for GM to start looking, rather than trying to put folate back in wheat, I think there's an opportunity to do other things like increase the palatability of grass, increase root mass, multiply tillers, and in terms of wheat, you fix the soil, and if you were to put GM biota into the soil, you wouldn't need to put B5 into wheat. Super sequestering grasses and super soil biota would be the way I see it going. I'd like to thank my GFP travel companions. Chivalry is still alive and well in Australian Mails, I've decided. They carried my bag for me many a times, and they let me sit up the front of the bus for the whole trip. There's planes everywhere. And I'd also like to thank my husband Glenn and my 2 children who travelled with me for the entire time of my private research. My little girl was also a Nuffield baby. She's been around the world twice before she turned 1. Once in my tummy on my GFP and once on my hip on my private research. So that's it. Thank you.